I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, pal.
Your network, know your rights. Max. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to the MKH Podcast. I am your host, Maximillian Hill, and today we have a very special guest. Martins Udotai is the founder of Dinesurf, a software company that is revolutionizing the restaurant industry. Martins, thank you for coming on the MKH Podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
It's always a pleasure to connect with you. Recently, we caught up at the Rocket Mixer $50,000 pitching contest in New York City. And I thought you gave a wonderful pitch. And the reason for this podcast is we're going to talk about the components necessary that are necessary to put together a winning pitch. So before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your experience pitching and raising money.
Thank you. So I think for me, I first started like doing pitching for like a startup company when I took an entrepreneurship class during my master's at NYU, taught by Steve Kluyan, who's a seasoned entrepreneur. And the class model was somewhat different, where we didn't have regular classwork or schoolwork, and we had to form companies and teams during the semester. And every week, our class was just basically every team pitches the whole class and gets feedback. So for 12 to 14 weeks of the entire alpha semester many years ago, all I did was pitch my first startup, sit it week on week, get feedback and improve. And I think that was when I got into pitching or pitching a business. I think if I to take steps back and go maybe I don't want to age myself, but if I go like 2 decades back, it's more so I used to be on a debate club where I had to know how to communicate my ideas, whether I was arguing for or against a particular topic. So I think that foundation also helped me. Plus, my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom with me growing up, she's an English major who has an MBA, a master's in communication, and a PhD in communication and public speaking. So having her as my personal mentor and guide when I was practicing for debate club many decades ago up until now definitely had a huge role to my ability and confidence in public speaking. And since then, with both my first startup, Sit Eat and Dinesurf, I've won over five entrepreneurship pitching competition, been a finalist many times, gotten prizes of tens of thousands of dollars from universities like NYU and Wharton up onto state governments here in the US of I think $21,000 grants from the Minnesota many years ago. So that's kind of like my experience. I've graced several years from pitching in on Zoom to classroom to pitching as one of 7 startups at Gary V's startup convention in Minnesota at the Viking Stadium a couple of years ago. So I've been privileged to be on several of those stages.
That's great. You mentioned having a mentor who was very skilled in debate and public speaking. I think that helps immensely. So, obviously, very qualified in public speaking and pitching. So, for our listeners, if there's anyone here who is an aspiring entrepreneur or maybe someone who is an employee but just wants to get better at giving presentations, right? I think everyone could benefit from this topic. Let's get into it. What are the components of a strong winning pitch?
Yeah, so I always like to think about pitching or public speaking as like telling a story. And when it comes to like pitching any idea or pitching yourself, whatever it is, I think there are 3 basic emotions you want your story to convey. And almost to a science, those 3 basic emotions need to be conveyed in almost a particular order. And they are empathy, curiosity, and belief. So when we think about it, we start with empathy. Empathy, you need to be able to evoke empathy in the audience, whoever you're pitching to, whoever is listening to your pitch. And basically, empathy is answering the question for them of why should I care? Like, why should I care about this problem you're trying to solve, or why should I care about anything else you have to say? But basically, if in the first couple of seconds or the first couple of minutes of your speech or your public speaking, you're not able to answer the question of why should they care, then you basically lost them. And there are a couple of different ways to go around answering that aspect of why should you care. One of them is by stating facts and numbers. So, for example, with Dinesurf, one way to state it's like Africa is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. 4 out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. And the biggest driving force behind these fastest growing economies is our formal and informal transactions, of which 62% are in the food and beverage industry. Now, although this industry is heavily driving our economic growth, less than 10% of them are digitized, and less than 12% of the businesses in these spaces have their own infrastructure as little as a website. So now people are saying, okay, I'm seeing these contracts. There's a very big, growing, fast economy with very little infrastructure already. So if they have even moderate infrastructure, they can probably grow faster. If they get a little bit of digitization, they can grow even faster. So that's an example of one way. Another way to evoke empathy is to tell your personal story. So if you have a personal story of trial and triumph with release that particular problem, you can also do that as well. One way I do that is by sharing my family story and background in the food beverage space. Our family has been here for about 70 years, and sharing how my grandparents and my parents tried to have a successful restaurant business and why they weren't able to do that, and how I personally want to be able to solve that problem for people like my family and other families across Africa. That's another reason to show why I care and why the audience should care about this problem. So that's the first component behind the pitch, empathy and answering the question, why should you care?
And then the second component is curiosity.
Yes. So curiosity is the second component. So now you've picked the curiosity, you've picked their curiosity. So now they care. But like, what else do they need to know? They are dying to know more. They're on the edge, trying to find out, okay, now you've told us about this big problem. I'm speaking from a pitch perspective. Now you've told us about this big problem. So they're curious. What are you going to do about it? Right? So that's the next question. So for us, again, just using that as an example, we've told you about this big problem about the restaurant industry space. We're talking about how our families could not solve this problem for themselves. Now, you're curious, trying to find out, okay, now that we know this problem, how does things get better? How do things get better? Like, what is going to change? What is going to give? And this is where you give him a bit more explanation about the bridge between the problem and the solution, and then you share your solution on how it works for the first time. So in our case, my brother and I are building Dinesurf to give restaurants a third choice, because right now they are faced with two impossible choices. Option A, spend thousands of dollars upfront to build infrastructure that will require maintenance from in-house or agency services. Or option B, outsource their marketing and growth to aggregator platforms alongside 30% of their top line revenue and all of their customer data, which keeps them in golden handcuffs and they are not in charge of their own growth. Now we are giving them a third solution where we're providing them website and infrastructure with zero development costs and a month-to-month payment up and live in 48 hours, online digital payments, and also helping them build their own data and mailing lists that they can then use for targeted marketing via WhatsApp and email to drive repeat businesses. So now the curiosity question of what are you going to do about it has been solved. For example, if you are trying to solve world hunger, say, oh, X amount of people every day go to bed hungry. Okay, now I care about it. What are you going to do about it? We partner with restaurants and food pantries to take over leftover food from restaurants to food pantries to disperse them to the places that there is most need. Now I'm curious. Now, once empathy has been evoked, people now care about the problem. They are curious about to learn more about your solution and what you're going to do to change it. Now it leaves us with the last emotion that you need to convey in the hearts of your listeners for a successful pitch, and that is belief. So assuming you've done the first two parts properly, and I now care about the problem you're pitching me about, I'm now curious to know about the problem and how you're solving it, and my curiosity has been satisfied. The last factor that you need to convey is belief. Like, why should I believe that you and your team and your proposed solution are the best fit to solve this problem that you have gotten me to now care about? Now, before this pitch, I had no idea, or you had no idea about what African restaurants are facing. Now you do. You had no idea how my company, Dinesurf, solves that problem. Now you do. But now my job here is not yet complete until I've conveyed to you that Dinesurf and the team behind Dinesurf are the best team to solve it. And you can do it in a couple of ways. You can show traction, you can show team experience, you can show both, and you can show your plan. So, for example, with Dinesoft, we spent the first 3.5, despite coming from a restaurant family with over 70 years of experience, we spent the first 3.5 years of Dinesoft working close with almost 400 restaurants and testing out different models that we had seen work in other markets to find out what to have work in Africa, right? After a series of testing, we discovered a model where providing them with a website with digital payment and a CRM was the minimum required stack that a restaurant needed to own their growth and own their future. Now that I've shown that traction, I also to then back it up by like, why are we the best to do it? Well, because we've done it before. My brother and I, although we are now focusing on restaurant e-commerce, we actually joined an e-commerce startup in Columbus, Ohio, where I was a founding or early product hire, and I helped scale the team to $3 billion yearly in sales. And we worked and built solutions for top retailers like Best Buy, Wayfair, eBay, Amazon, Target, Walmart, and we ended up being acquired without fundraising for about $250 million, so about $240 million a few years ago. And in that role, we leverage our products to drive conversion and sales using AI automation and published content. So taking our experience from there and our background in the food space, we are now using that same thing to develop the e-commerce infrastructure for the restaurant and food businesses by providing them a website that ranks on Google, leveraging our experience, online digital payments, leveraging our experience, and marketing and growth, leveraging our experience. So now, if this part is done correctly, anybody listening to your pitch now has confidence and belief that not only do they now care about the problem? Not only were they then curious about how you solve the problem, but they've come to believe that you and your company are the best people to be able to solve this problem. And I always say a pitch is not a pitch if it doesn't end an ask. So at the end of the pitch, you always need to make an ask. An ask could be anything. It could be to investors, asking for them to fund your company. It could be supporters saying, hey, join our story, follow us on Instagram and support our journey as we revolutionize the industry. It could be a call to action to restaurants. Hey, if you're a restaurant owner in the room and you would like to own your future and own your growth without paying an arm and a leg, then you should speak to us at Timesoft. But at the end of making them care about the problem, aware of the problem, getting them curious about the solution, and get them to believe that you can solve the problem, they are now available for you to ask for whatever you need at the end of the pitch.
That's a great explanation. I never really thought about it like that, and that's the reason why I invited you to speak about this. So tell us a little bit more. So Dines are 5 years in business. Um, Tell me a little bit more about your family's background in the restaurant industry.
Oh,
Oh
yes.
yes. So
So my grandfather was an Italian trained chef. He worked in Italy shortly, and then he worked on a ship on the coast of Africa, on a fishing ship as the lead chef there. And then when in the 70s, he was the executive chef at one of the biggest hotels in Port Harcourt called Legend Hotel. And then in his later years, he became an Italian chef for private chef for an Italian family before he retired. His wife, my grandmother, was a restaurant owner and operator. She owned a restaurant for about 25 years, so the better part of 2.5 decades. But her restaurant was most like local dishes that was cooked with firewood and coal. So over the years, exposure to smoke developed asthma and bronchitis for her, and then she had to retire. But her stepping away from the business without being actively involved led to theft and other things, and then the business eventually closed. In my parents' generation, my parents had a sports bar and food catering business that my mom ran. But my mom also had to be a full stay-at-home mom and take care of the kids. And so her not being actively involved in the business at all times led to theft, and eventually that also closed down. And that is why my brother and I, having seen this happen over and over again, are trying to help restaurant owners in Africa achieve their dream by providing them with the tools they need to grow profitably.
That's terrific. Really excited about what you're building, and I remember the first time I saw your picture, I was like, man, this guy's good. He knows what he's doing. So, if any listeners or followers are interested in learning more about Dinesurf, where should they go?
Yes,
Yes,
so you
so you
can
can
go
go
to
to
our
our
website.
website.
And that is
You can go to our website at dinesurf.com, so dinesurf.com, or on across all social media at Dinesurf app. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the same handle, Dinesurf app.
excellent. Martins, thank you for your time today. And hopefully, we'll be able to catch up in Ohio, where you are, with our mutual friend Salif Tankawano. Always good to catch up with old friends in person. So, you have a wonderful day and stay warm.
You as
You as
well.
well.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Thanks for coming on the MKH podcast.
All right. Bye.
Bye.